This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. I like to preview the AFC North every year to get a good scope of what we should expect. Everybody's saying it's going to be the toughest division in football, at least on this side of the country. Ace, how are you doing? How are you feeling about the Bengals? I know it's got to be hard to get anything from camp with Joe Burrow's not there, because defensively it's like, you got Browning, the dude that used to play for Washington,
Jake Browning and Trevor Siemian. So I got some studs in there at camp right now.
So you're in a situation where if the defense don't look good, you're gonna be concerned. But then it's like he's also throwing to Jamar Chase, like he might just look good. So I know it's been a difficult camp for you all down there, but what have you been able to glean from it?
For me, I've been able to see that the Bengals, at least on the defensive side of the ball, really have had a plan at safety, at corner, doing some things that I haven't seen them do in the past in terms of trusting some of the younger players to get in early and often. You talk about DJ Turner. There was a point where we were wondering when Jordan Battle was going to actually start getting, reps with the first and second team. He's finally started to do that. You've seen the trust in Dax Hill. So I think from the defensive side of things, you look pretty comfortable. From the offensive side of things, you've seen some good things too, but you don't know how much stock to really put into it. And even when you see the stuff on defense, you don't know if it's like, all right, did they throw an interception because this is Jake Browning, or was this really just them doing something there? So it has been difficult because, this isn't something that we're not used to. Joe Burrow is dealing with something else again, which just seems to be this string of bad luck that he always has around this time.
Yeah, and it's like even in your joint practices, you went up against the Packers and it's Jordan Love, and it's like we don't even know what he is. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's just been a rough look. It's been a rough camp for the defense. Just like, how do you gauge what you're seeing versus who you're going against? And it's got to be difficult for them. But you go into the season, and I think the Bengals, like in a division full of interesting and in mystery, right? You got the Cleveland Browns, who knows what they're gonna be. You have the Baltimore Ravens, again, like so many changes going on internally, right? Like the outside part seemed the same, but like Todd Monken, a lot of stuff shifting around, priority shifting around there with the Baltimore Ravens. And then the Steelers with Kenny Pickett. A lot of people think they don't know what to expect with that, and we'll see. But it's all of these question marks. And then you have the Bengals who, it's funny how fast things change, right? 3 years ago, the Bengals were betting on a rookie quarterback who got hurt. They had the fourth pick of the draft, and they were easily the most inconsistent thing in the division. You fast forward 3 years, and they are the only consistent thing in this division. Like, it seems like you're making a wild bet on every other team but the Cincinnati Bengals, because this is the same team, basically, from last year. Like, you lost a couple parts, Von Bells. We talked about the safety situation in the AFC North talk, but you still got Cheeto. You still got BJ, you still got DJ, you still have all of these pieces along the defense, and then offensively, you've just added people, right? Orlando Brown Jr., Leo Collins last year, even though we don't know what his status is going to be to start the season, and obviously the three great wide receivers in Joe Burrow. Let's talk about Orlando Brown Jr. He's supposed to kind of be that answer at left tackle. That's one position where I guess you could see a little bit more, because he is going up against Trey Henderson every once in a while in practice. I don't know who the Packers' best pass rusher is, but how has he looked? Has he looked like he's going to be able to make that transition to the Bengals and be that guy that y'all need against a Myles Garrett, especially given how the Bengals like to attack offensively, which means less help for that left tackle?
Yeah, I think, Orlando Brown has looked as advertised. It did start off a little shaky with him and Trey Hendrickson, because there was just this crazy play where apparently Trey Hendrickson doesn't know, like, going 50% or, 3/4 of the way. So I guess Orlando was used to, in Kansas City, guys not going that hard. And so they kind of actually got into it that first day. Trey Hendrickson had apparently, like, Orlando Brown grabbed his jersey after the play and just left this huge gash across Trey Hendrickson's neck. So they actually kind of got off to a bumpy start, but he kind of immediately apologized. He was just like, I'm the new guy here. I didn't know, that he was going to be going, 1,000% and running every single play. And that kind of started a mutual respect between them. And then he's, for the most part, been able to step in kind of as a leader on that offensive line who's desperately needed it. I think Lyle kind of played in that role last year, but with him being on the rehab and trying to come back, he hasn't been able to be there as much. So Orlando Brown has definitely taken over that position. There was some drama, obviously, with Jonah Williams initially. That has kind of subsided away. It seems like both of them are on the same page. At first, Jonah was upset that they brought in a new left tackle. That was the main reason that Orlando Brown wanted to come to the Bengals, is because he wanted to play for a contender that would allow him the opportunity to play left tackle. And I think that in Baltimore, that's the main reason that he left. We saw that. And then in Kansas City, I don't think he was guaranteed the ability to or the potential to play left tackle. I don't think it was a lock. And so that's one of the reasons that he took less money to come to Cincinnati, because we were literally giving him that. And if you know anything about Orlando Brown, he's really into his father, and his father kind of made him promise to not pay right tackle and to play left tackle. But I think all in all, he's been a great culture fit. We haven't actually seen him in the preseason yet. We haven't seen any of the starters in the preseason on the offensive line outside of Jonah. We'll see if we see them in this last preseason game, because Zach Taylor kind of does that, where he doesn't like to play too many starters in the preseason. Last season, it kind of backfired. It led to them kind of coming out very, very behind and not really having that chemistry that they would have had they had played. And you saw that really the first couple of weeks of the season. So it'll be interesting to see if they put Orlando and those guys out there for this last preseason game, because the last time they didn't do that, it didn't go so well. But I think Orlando has really fit in as one of the vocal leaders on this team and really the face of the offensive line.
Yeah, see, one of the things Orlando Brown Jr. did not know about Trey Hendrickson is what he is also from Florida. And two, that was a 3rd-round pick from Florida Atlantic. Yeah. That man's always going 110%. Like that, like them dudes from small schools who like get in the late rounds, who make it in the NFL. Nah, man. It's like those dudes, and then like you ever like the UDFA guys who have like 10-year careers, never ever take a playoff. Ever. Because to them, that's how they're wired. It's like, yo, if I take a playoff, I might get cut. Even if they're Mike Hilton. Like, even if you like develop yourself into what was it, I can't, Terrell Davis, right? He was an undrafted free agent, I believe. And it was like, yo, man, he never not ran hard. Like, even when he was Terrell Davis, like, it's like, yo, bro, you can chill. Like, you don't have to do this. No vet days off, nothing like that. Those guys, the middle to late round dudes, or them 3 stars that turn themselves into NFL prospects.
Facts.
Those dudes are always dangerous. Like what Sam Hubbard's another one, right? Where it's like he got to Ohio State as like a 3-star, kind of like one of them dudes who's supposed to always wear a jersey, never play, ends up playing next to I think Joey Bosa, and all-time hustle guy. Like all time. That's a hustling defensive line that the Bengals have there. They got motor for sure. But yeah, it's one of the things with Orlando Brown that I always thought would be a concern for him in Kansas City, and it just didn't end up being that much of a concern, kind of because Pat Mahomes has great pocket presence, and then it's like also if you can get pressures on Pat Mahomes just mean less because he could just throw the ball from so many different platforms that you never really got him pressured. And it's similar with Joe Burrow. So I think he'll be fine because Joe's really great pocket presence. Not the same arm as Pat Mahomes. Nobody has that, but still able to get the ball off whenever he needs to.
And that's one of the things is he's fast at getting it out. I think he's probably a little bit faster than Pat when it comes to that. So, if there is a situation, I don't see Joe taking like a 7-step drop and taking a long time to do it. Obviously, he does have plays where he tries to extend the play, but if you look at like just his average time to throw, it's usually like, sub 3 seconds. It's not, he's getting it out of there pretty fast. And honestly, a lot of that probably has had to do with how bad the offensive line has been the last couple of years. So, no, I think that they'll pair together pretty well.
How do you guys feel about the offensive line in total?
This is the first time where I feel like they finally have a legit offensive line. I feel like it got better last year, especially on the interior. The interior was night and day from 2021 to 2022, but the issue really remained at the tackle position. I think it got solidified with Lyle, who initially started last season playing hurt. You know, he had a hurt back, so he was actually playing hurt the entire season before he ended up getting a knee injury. And so Lyle actually started to round into form around the Saints game, I feel like, because he just had a monster game against Cam Jordan. And then Jonah just never could really get it together last year. I mean, he struggled. He played hurt as well, the two dislocated knees. And then you lose both of those guys and you throw Jackson Carman in there. And it almost was kind of a false sense of confidence because Jonah goes down week 18 against the Ravens, right? So in that game, Jonah goes down. You had already lost Lyle by that point. So you threw Jackson Carman in there. At one point, you threw Max Sharping in there. And it kind of was fool's gold because when you played against the Ravens, they were able to get by. And then you had to play against the Bills. And the biggest thing about that game was it was in snow, right? So guys wouldn't have been able to cut and bend the way that they normally would in better weather conditions. So it made you think like, oh, okay, we can get by with Max Sharping and Jackson Carman at left tackle.
And then Chris Jones came out and blew all that.
Chris Jones wrecked the whole thing. So I would say from a starting standpoint, I feel like they're better. I also feel like from a depth standpoint, they're better because right now, basically, you kind of essentially have Lyle Collins as your swing tackle. I honestly think Lyle Collins, to me, was the perfect guy to put at right tackle. Like, I actually think he would be better than Jonah, but the way that his injury lined up, it just won't allow him to be here. So I expect him to probably go on the PUP list and kind of join midseason. But the thing is, Jonah isn't really the healthiest person ever either. I think he's only played like one full season. So I'm just thinking that the Bengals are thinking, all right, we got two guys, they got injury issues at tackle. One of these guys is going to be here throughout the season. But when it comes to the backups in terms of the interior, I'm not comfortable with that. Like the backup center position is an issue for me. Backup guard, like I don't really trust Max Sharping. He was a second round pick. That's cool and whatever, but I don't trust him as like a long term answer. And then just some of the development behind the offensive line isn't as good. So I think the top part of the offensive line is good. I think the depth of tackle is good, but the development of some of the younger guys, the Jackson Carmans, the Deontay Smiths, you just haven't seen anything. They haven't gotten better. They just seem like the same guys that they were, which for the most part has been somewhat liabilities in certain points and not consistent guys that you can depend on. So it is still a little bit of a issue with the younger linemen, but I think at the top with you adding in Orlando Brown, there's less variables, but you still don't know if there's an injury at center, knock on wood or something like that. I don't know how they handle that.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about week one because like I find the Browns roster and the Bengals roster like this fascinating Cold War kind of, right? Where like the Bengals, they invest the offensive line partially because they're like, why does this stuff why does the 95 always keep like coming through, right? And the Browns go, okay, I see an upgrade on. We'll get a defensive tackle. We'll get two defensive tackles, and then we'll trade for Zadarius Smith. And it's like, oh, okay, you build this wall. The Browns build a wall again, and it's like, okay, they're going to keep going. You get three wide receivers. The Browns feel like they have three corners. And it's funny because the corners and the wide receivers for the Bengals match up almost identically with their skill set, right? You have a long physical guy like a Tyler Boyd at corner and Martin Emerson. You have a super fast, super twitchy, elite athlete from an elite school in Denzel Ward to match up with Jamar Chase. And then you have the real technical, real quick dude who has burst, but not necessarily like super elite high-end speed in T. Higgins with Greg Newsome. And it's just so interesting to me like how these teams, I don't think they intentionally did it, but they built a shadow to each other. No, right. And it's one of those things. And I'm wondering, since the Browns and the Bengals have been this kind of rivalry over the last few years, because of the Browns being built in like this very kind of like we build things for your strengths and then we also have things for your weaknesses in a way that like has given the Bengals problems. Is that the one team you're like, hey man, if they become something we have to worry about in January, that's a team I don't want to get good. Like the Ravens, you've had success with them at their best. The Steelers, you've had success against them with their best. You know, the Titans, the Chiefs, but the Browns are the one team. It's like even when they stunk, they've been able to get our number. Is that a team where you're like, man, that's a team that I'm worried about if this gets to January? Because these things have been issues, and if they're playing well, I don't know what that means for us.
Yeah, I think the Browns are, and I say it all the time, much to Bengals fans' chagrin, and they try to say that I'm like a closet Browns fan when I'm honestly just keeping it a buck. Like you said, these two teams literally are built to battle each other, right? Like there's like for every punch, there's a counter punch, like you said, with the offensive line, defensive line of the Browns, the secondary. It is a tough matchup. I think you should always try to feel confident, like whenever you're playing anybody in January. But I would think that the Browns is always going to be a tough matchup. And I think the Bengals treat it that way. I think the players on the Bengals feel the same way. Like, yes, they might want smoke and stuff like that, but I think that they know that that's the team that plays them the toughest. And the Ravens have tried to act like they're that team. It really hasn't been like in 2021, like we put like 82 points on their beaks. And I know that they're going to be upset when they see me say this. But, you know, a lot of them, you know, the first game it was against Lamar Jackson. Jamar Chase put 200 on Marlon Humphrey. Everybody knows that.
Is that 525?
There was 525 that year later.
Oh, that's like a different game?
That's a different game. But like if you take the sum of those two games, like Burrow basically threw for 1,000 yards, whereas we know against Cleveland, he's never done that. So for me, Cleveland has always been that team that has been a hard matchup for the Bengals. And I feel like the only reason that they finally broke through a little bit on it last year was they kind of figured out with GJ Reader against Nick Chubb, how that's going to measure out. But now you guys have Deshaun Watson. So it's a totally different counterpunch now with Deshaun Watson, with some of the weapons that you guys have over there. And then adding to the defensive line that you guys already had. Like you mentioned, we added Orlando Brown. Now you guys got Zadarius Smith and Myles Garrett. And you added some guys in the middle of that line as well to counter a Joe Mixon or anything like that. So I do think that the Browns would be a team to definitely be cautious against if I'm thinking about in the playoffs.
It's going to be interesting to see how this season kind of irons out. And it must be interesting for you, and in some ways kind of boring for you to be like, well, you know, I know what to expect from this team. Nobody's really debating it, you know, and it's just more of business as usual. People kind of expect the Bengals to be one of the better teams in the AFC. So that's going to be it. Hold on. I think my battery is about to, yep.
No, it's all good.
Yeah. And
the web, you got the camera battery?
Yeah, sometimes I think I need to get a new one.
I gotta send you this link that Flimlo sent me. It's a fake battery. So like
yeah, that's why I got.
Oh, you got that? Okay.
Yeah. I gotta get a new one because it's not. Sometimes it doesn't touch the sensor all the way, so it thinks it's an incompatible battery. Gotcha. But I got the endless power there because Sonny put me onto that because he had this in his camera. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how the AFC wraps up. I think it's going to be fascinating, especially this division, what goes on around the Bengals. And who knows, like maybe the Bengals show some fatigue because they've been going to like the AFC Championship game for like the last 2 years. That's got to have some level of fatigue to the guys. That's probably why Jamar Chase is like, hey, take it easy, Joe. Take it easy. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's with the Chiefs, man. It's like, that's turned into an AFC North like rivalry as well, just because there's been a lot of talking on both sides, right? Like, and it's even continued into the offseason. So I do think that that's going to fuel a lot, but we're not looking past the division. We already know that you have to win this division first and then get to a team like the Chiefs. But to lose the way that we did last year against them and then to watch them celebrate, win the Super Bowl, to watch them talk about, you know, obviously the mayor, Jamar Chase's comments, all of that stuff. I think that will be something that's going to fuel this team for sure because, you know, I think the Chiefs feel like they've already gotten over the hump, and I feel like a lot of the Bengals feel like, nah, this is kind of just getting started.